All right, we have arrived in Hamamatsu. The first Ireland press conference of this particular leg of the trip is going to take place this afternoon in a little town a few miles west of here, I understand. It's called, or east of here, I should say. Iwata, it's called. It's about halfway between here and the match venue this weekend.
Yeah, and Joe Schmidt has spoken twice already about the hotel itself and how he's getting basically away from it all. Seems pretty thrilled by the venue and the fact that I think after a couple of days in the built-up areas in Chiba and then Yokohama, they're going to basically to a Japanese version of Carton House. It seems to be a more traditional Japanese venue as well. We haven't been there yet. We might not actually get there at all because we're actually, doing all the interviews and stuff at the training ground. But he seems delighted about it. Whether the players would be delighted to be cooped up miles away from anywhere remains to be seen. But I think this whole tournament was always going to be really intense first 10, 15 days until the second match. And I think they'll be allowed to breathe a little bit after that.
It is intense, more so down here when it comes to the weather. You step off the bullet train yesterday and it hits you.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's not as bad today, and I haven't looked at the forecast for the rest of the week yet. Last week was pretty much all weather based. Hopefully, we're not talking about it as much, but it is very, very hot, or was yesterday anyway, because it was raining as well. So it just had that weird kind of sweat and rain. You're not sure which one is which. So it was, hopefully, kind of. Today is quite a nice temperate day. I'm sure that'll be good for their training today. Be nice if it got a bit brighter. It's a bit dull out there, a bit grey, but it's going to be challenging. I mean, 6 days is and Japan played a high tempo. It will probably affect things on Saturday.
You were at Wales last night. How impressive were they?
They were good. I mean, it's hard to know how good Georgia were. I mean, Wales, the reason I went almost was just to see how Wales were getting on after all the controversy they'd been through with the Howley stuff, whether there was a hangover. I mean, it was a bit of a kind of a Welsh version of Saipan, maybe on a lower scale. Within 2 minutes and 10 seconds they'd scored, and they did it in such simple fashion that it begged the question, how good were Georgia at all? They scored 4 tries off first phase, which I suppose Rob Howley was probably watching from home going, well, they're all my moves, and they scored off them. And they were good. Georgia actually, after those 4 tries, grew into the game and played really well and drew the second half. And speaking to Graham Rowntree afterwards, he was saying, look, we're not a bad team, we just don't get to play enough Tier 1 teams. So when we make these mistakes, we never get to learn from them because it's 4 years before, they played 4 Tier 1 teams between the 2 tournaments. Wales very impressive. We'll know more on Sunday when they play Australia up in Tokyo.
Is that going to be another theme of this year's World Cup, that there's just going to be this massive divide between the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 teams? It's a story as old as time, but you're starting to see that perhaps the gap is actually growing, if anything else.
Yeah, it seems to be unlikely that there's going to be a shock at this World Cup. I think Japan against Scotland, is that even a shock? They're at home. They've kind of developed. They are technically a Tier 2 team, but they've had Tier 1 preparation probably, and because they knew this World Cup was coming, and they beat South Africa at the last World Cup. Fiji, if they had got that, if Australia had gotten Reece Hodge sent off, it might have been a different story. They show what they could do for 40 minutes, but again, they don't play enough games together. They don't spend enough time together. Their players are scattered across France and the world. It's very, very difficult for them. They don't have the structures. There's protectionist markets in Ireland, Wales, Scotland that don't employ those players, deliberately, unless they're willing to come and play for Ireland. England has limited the access the players from abroad have because they want to have more English players. France are doing the same with the rules. It's getting harder and harder for players from Tier 2 nations to get contracts and thus develop in that way, and then there's not enough resources in those countries to keep them together, and not enough games, because Georgia are the best of the rest in Europe. They're the top of the they win that Six Nations B tournament every year. They came up against the Grand Slam champions, got blown away. They did a lot right. They scrummaged really well. They have their strengths like all of these teams. But we're going to see Ireland against Tier 2 opposition in the next 3 games before that inevitable quarterfinal against South Africa. And really, Japan aside, Samoa might give it a rattle. They always bring something to the table. They probably won't be troubled, and that's it's a shame because it is a World Cup, and you should have more than 8 or 9 really good teams. It should be more competitive than that.
Is it a case where Ireland actually have 3 experimental games now? Because one of the pieces of logic might have been 2 tough games and 2 easy ones, but actually it might be the case where Scotland might have been our toughest game at the pool.
Well, I think it was always going to be the toughest on paper, but with a 6-day turnaround against the hosts, who are a good team, they're not a threat for winning the whole tournament. I think they could take Scotland out, and they've had 8 days to prepare. They'll feel that they're, whereas the expectation last Friday night in Tokyo was on them, fully on them, and you could see that in the jitters. They'll feel that the pressure's on Ireland this time around, that they've, obviously made a statement last Sunday. They're the number 2 ranked team in the world, and it keeps changing every week. But they're one of the favourites for the tournament. Everyone expects them to come out and do the same again to Japan, which is a difficult thing to do in the circumstances. I'm not saying Japan will win the game. I think they will test them. but I think Russia will be a bit of a walkover. Samoa will be a physical battle, and I can see Joe Schmidt taking some frontliners out this week, freshening things up, putting them back in against Russia so that they get 60, 70 minutes, and then taking them back out against Samoa, because he'll feel that the squad can beat Samoa. But also, if he loses one or two players in massive collisions with big Samoans, he'd rather it was, say, Jack Carty rather than Johnny Sexton,
sure,
with all due respect to Jack Carty. So I think there will be, it gives them the leeway to be smart. They're top of the pool, they've taken full control, they've beaten the only real rival for topping the pool. And I think Scotland are now, scrambling around. Two players have gone home, Finn Russell, not Finn Russell, Hamish Watson and Ali Price. Two of their best players are gone. They're in absolute crisis mode, whereas Ireland can just sail through, rotating their squad. Even if they don't get bonus points, even if they're under par, they're still going to get there in the end, and where they want to be, and they'll get a lot of game time shared around, so it's a happy camp.
So are you expecting that Ireland go with their first team this weekend, depending on who's available?
No, I think Schmidt has indicated that he will make changes. I think the fact that Rory Best went for 80 minutes on Sunday suggests to me that he won't start on Saturday, because why would you make a 37-year-old turn around like that? He's got two good hookers there in Scannell and Cronin. Why not use them? I think he could see, say, Peter Mann, he might overcome all of his protocols, but why throw him out there when you've got Rhys Ruddock there? Players like that, does Johnny Sexton go again? I mean, they said it was a bang to the thigh yesterday. He got a lot of treatment around his groin area when he did go down. Do you take him out of the firing line, give Carberry 60, 70 minutes, or even Carty, who was very good off the bench, and bring Carberry in? He's got loads and loads of options, apart from in that kind of centre back three area, where we still have, we'll learn later on. Well, we'll get the official line later on what's going on, whether it matches up to reality, I don't know. But like Keith Earls did the warm up on Sunday, so did Joey Carberry. Looks like they're fit. Whereas Bundyaki, again, like Omani, do you risk him, or do you pull him out and just give him an extra week? Even if he's clearing those protocols, just give him a break and bring him back in for the Russia games. And he'd probably be mad to play against Samoa because of the personal connection he has to that country. So yeah, he's given himself the wiggle room. I think what we'll see is probably 10 of the team that started last week, 4 or 5 changes, something around those matches. He'll rotate it. A lot of players will drop to the bench and come in. It's just good squad management. He'll probably, say Ryan, Furlong, the younger players will probably back up. Some of the older players, maybe he'll look at giving them a rest.
With kind of a medium-term view, assuming that there's not going to be any fresh injuries, we talked about the 3 injuries last week: Carney, Earls and Robbie Henshaw. To what extent do those 3 now have a battle in their hands to get their starting jersey back?
Yeah, well, I mean, they wouldn't have been too comfortable watching, particularly Rob Carney, because I thought Jordan Armour did really, really well, did everything that was asked of him against a team that didn't play well, but still probed with their kicking game in difficult conditions. Changed halfway through the game. He adapted. I thought Andrew Conway looked razor sharp, dropped 2 balls early on, but grew into the game. Both looked like really, really strong attackers. And we've seen even that New Zealand-South Africa game on Saturday night, the small, quick players are having a good World Cup. And Keith Earls has that as well. I mean, Conway and Earls, they play on the opposite wings for Munster, but they're competing for one spot here because Jacob Stockdale's automatically going to start. So I think Earls' seniority will probably get him back. I think Rob Kearney, it depends who you're playing against, but if you're playing against either the Boks or New Zealand, or really any of the teams in those latter stages who have that really intelligent kicking game, he has an awful lot of credit in the bank. But Larmour's the man in possession of the jersey, and he deserves to get another chance. And I thought it was interesting that Kearney didn't do the warm-up on Sunday. That would indicate to me that he's behind the rest of them. Henshaw, I'm really not sure when we're going to see him. I mean, the sounds of things is that that's more serious. But Will Addison's picked up an injury back in Ulster, so the guy who's on standby is injured as well. Does that mean Dave Kearney's next in line? Is that why they're hanging on to him? Because they don't feel like there's any, whereas Addison come in and cover 5 positions, they can't really bring Dave Kearney out. Is a bit of a specialist. So Henshaw's, they've all lost ground at the weekend because everyone gave a really, really good performance against a Tier 1 opponent, and that's really going to be the reference point going into that South Africa game in 3 or 4 weeks' time, because whatever happens in these couple of weeks, there will always be a bit of an asterisk about what they were up against, even though there was a bit of that with Scotland because they were so bad.
We've seen all the top teams play now at this point. Has your view changed on what the World Cup final is going to be?
Oh, I mean, I think I predicted England and South Africa, which is looking a bit ridiculous now. I kind of did that, and then I looked at what England have to do to get there, and they have to beat France, Argentina, and then win quarter-final, semi-final and final. That's a very tough road to get there. I thought the Boks were supercharged in that first 20 minutes and looked unbelievable, and I really thought they were going to blow New Zealand away, but it turned out they were basically putting an 80-minute performance in 20 minutes and punched themselves out. Didn't get enough on the board. I wouldn't be writing them off by any means. I think Ireland have definitely reminded us of how good they are. We've all been sucked into the just a bit of doom and gloom over 2019, but really understandably so. I mean, some of the performances were really poor, but I thought they hit back to that level. I mean, their efficiency in the 22 was really good, and there's opportunity to get much better. Their power game is back. Their forward play was excellent. They're so good out of touch. They're looking really, really good, Nick. So I think they're really contenders. Wales will wait and see. Australia, I think they're all semi-final contenders without being necessarily the ones to win it. And then there's New Zealand, who I think are always the favourites. I just have a feeling they're going to be taken out along the way. And I thought Rassie Erasmus in the aftermath of the game said he reckoned that the Northern Hemisphere sides will ask New Zealand the questions that they don't get asked on a regular basis, and might trip them up. And it could be England, it could be Ireland to take them out at some stage.
Right, very interesting. It'd be before a semi-final, though, or before a final, it'd be likely England at this point, right? If it was going to be New Zealand getting tripped up.
Yeah, I think it's England, looking at like an England semi-final, and then depending on whether Ireland, I have a terrible fear that Ireland will win a quarter-final and then lose to Wales in a semi-final. It's just, I think the amount of emotion that will come out of having actually got there, then to turn around in a week and go again, especially against the Boks with all the focus. I mean, I think we're in day one of a 29-day build-up to this South Africa game. I mean, it's just going to be, like, by the time, I don't know what angles we're going to be got. Like, the last couple of days are going to be a real drag. But I mean, with Rassie Erasmus, they've even called up another Munster, former Munster prop, and Thomas Dutoy. There's now 5 ex-Munster people in their setup. I mean, it's just amazing. Like, as a storyline, it's to get your head around. It's great. It's going to be good fun. And I think Rassie's, they're all dancing around it now. They're all, I think, when we go out there today, I have a feeling they're all going to avoid the questions about South Africa, but they'll know it's there. They'll know that's what they're building towards, and it's going to be fascinating if they get past that. I just have always hoped that if Ireland ever get past the quarter final, that they don't see that as the achievement, that they realise that if they take out the Boks, I think it's the hardest quarter final they've had since '91. Like, that they can't fear anyone, But anyway, that's way down the line. But I think Ireland have announced themselves as being legitimate top 2, 3 in the world teams, as we saw in 18, and can go far in this current tournament if they can hold it all together.
All right, well, we are off to Ireland training this afternoon. You can read Ruaidhri O'Connor's work in the Irish Independent tomorrow morning, and we'll chat to you soon here on OTB AM. Thanks, Ruaidhri.
Cheers on.
Yeah, so pretty confident stuff coming from Japan.
It's but I was just watching, thinking think back to a few weeks ago, like when it was all doom and gloom. I think we're kind of setting us. I don't know. It's good to be positive. It's good to be confident.
It is, yeah.
But it could be setting ourselves up for a fall. And compared to like when you just, for me, as not like I wouldn't know the technicalities of rugby. I would just be, passive, not passive. Yeah, just a big game fan. Like jump on the bandwagon at this type of event. But like when you look at the New Zealand and South Africa game, it was like they were playing it in a different league, almost like a different sport. What you were seeing, but I think it's just Scotland. We should just remember that it's just Scotland.
Yeah. And
they're an attacking team, and they don't, they concede tries, and they're not.
The weather wasn't great for them.
They're open,
And the Scots papers have been saying it was the worst Scottish performance they can remember ever. And they've got some pretty bad performances in their locker that they're like, this is the worst I've ever seen from a Scotland team.
So,
just need to balance that out a little bit.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.